Hey everyone, this is Jennifer Beamer, owner-operator of Vegetable Diet Art by Science, and in this video, we're going to ask the question, can it be saved? Depending on when this video actually goes live, I posted a photo of this bit of the fleece to Instagram, and I asked the question, can it be saved? And that's a really important question, and if you're new to processing fleeces, you're going to run into a situation where either some of it or all of it, or if you were donated a fleece, there's going to be vegetable matter. And when I go through various spinning or fleece or crafting forums of various kinds like Reddit or Facebook or whatever, inevitably there's this question that someone asks, I was just given this fleece, or I've just noticed there's a lot of vegetable matter. Is it worth saving? And there are various responses. A lot of them are experience-based. So people who are more experienced will weigh in and say, well, in my experience, I have found it too frustrating, or I think it's not worth it, or whenever this happens, I do X or Y or Z, which is fine. But I also think it needs to be those follow-up questions that you ask that matter the most in deciding whether or not it's worth saving. So, for a little bit of context, and we're sitting on the floor in my craft room with this horrible yellow wall behind me because I bought this fleece that wasn't coated, and it's not a purebred, but it's got this really lovely kind of Wensleydale luster, and the locks are very shiny and silky, so I think there's definitely some blue-faced luster in it. In fact, if you watched my video on how to tidy up a fleece, this was the one that I didn't get to in that video. I did the other one. So now that I have fully processed this and washed it, I did notice that this sheep was quite mischievous or adventurous and got into things. So I opened up the whole fleece, and it's beautiful, except for there was this one patch that had a load of vegetable matter in it. So what I did was I just portioned out the fleece, and this is actually a little bit of the lead up to the worst bit of the vegetable matter, but the rest of it is really, really clean and is washed and will be minimally processed. But as you can see, there are small bits here that have bits of thorns, but overall the fleece is pretty clean, and so I will be able to process this by hand, you know, either at the drum carder or before I package it up to sell. I might sell some of it as just dyed locks and not card everything. But this small piece, which is probably not 100 grams. I guess it would be about 100 grams. I think it's probably more like about 70 grams. And it had a lot of vegetable matter in there. I don't know if you can hear, but my cat Layla is just yowling. She wants to come in here and be part of this so badly. But you can kind of see there's actually quite a bit here. It's just a bit of a mess. So you have the question, can it be saved? And that's kind of like the starting question. So if you think of it sort of like a tree, so your top question is, can it be saved? And then there might be branching out different questions. So if you want to think of it kind of like a flow chart, fine. If you want to think about it as sort of like, these are the range of answers that I can come up with based on that initial one. And then you might apply some value judgment to various answers. So like some of them you might value more as an answer than others. So what I'm driving at here is it's not a very simple question to answer. And so this video is trying to help break down some of the reasons why I might want to save this fleece. But it might not apply to everything that I do. And over the course of my experience with hand spinning and processing fleeces, so I got my first one back in, I want to say late 2010, maybe? Maybe it was early 2011. But I've been hand processing fleeces for a very long time. And the initial one that I did was a Cormo cross fleece, and it was really soft, but I was kind of pedantic about saving every tiny little bit and getting as much yield as possible. And it was because my socioeconomic status at the time was I was really, really, really poor. And I needed to conserve as much money as possible, which meant I needed to focus more on getting as much out of this fleece that I bought than saving myself time or just, you know, the effort or the tedium of having to pull out all the vegetable matter and second cuts. So now that I'm not quite in the same financial situation and I have a lot more experience, I can be more choosy. Just because I'm a bit choosier now doesn't mean that I will always answer in the same sort of ways. So for example, I might have a very inexpensive fleece and take the time to really tidy it up nicely because it's really good for these kinds of projects. And if I need volume, for example, I'm going to do 2 sweaters. I've got some wool up here behind me that you can't quite see. That was essentially a free fleece, well, group of fleeces. And so because there wasn't any monetary involvement, that isn't always going to play into how you assess whether it's worth it or not to go the extra mile and process the extraneous vegetable matter out. So because I was focusing on volume for a project that would make 2 sweaters or jumpers if you're in the UK, then it was important for me to have as much of the fleece available for that project, despite the fact that it was free. So it was worth it at that point to take out all of the vegetable matter, which I have done very painstakingly and quite annoyingly. I didn't have quite enough, so I'm still gonna have to figure out what to do with that. But anyway, so it's not just about how much it costs should be factored into whether it's worth it or not. The second thing I would say is not all vegetable matter is created equal. So I'm specifically talking about vegetable matter. I'm not talking about anything else like scurf or dandruff, because those are different types of problems that might not be quite as applicable here. So I'm just going to talk about vegetable matter because some of it is easier to get out than others, and the type of fleece that you have can help with that decision. I talked about whiteface woodland and to a similar extent the blue taxel that I reviewed both for my Fiber Talk series. Those fleeces did have some vegetable matter, but they were really, really, really easy to clean in terms of actually washing the fleece, but when I processed it and I spun it, most, if not all, of the vegetable matter just came out without me having to really focus on that part. I took out the big things, but mostly it was a very clean fleece just through the nature of processing it and spinning it. So there's like the grass and the hay that sheep will eat, especially in the winter months when in certain parts of the world having pasture areas available might not be feasible. So in those cases, their feed is supplemented through things like hay. So hay can be quite easy to come out of fleeces. And so if you're looking at your vegetable matter and it's just like, it looks like grass or brown grass to you, it might be easier to come out than you think. Now for this fleece, they're thorns because where these animals live, they are doing the duty of preserving a landscape, which means it might not be really great for agriculture. It might not be great for human occupation. You know, you might not want to build a house there, but it's good for other land resources, and it's a good place for the animals to live, where in Britain, having a roast lamb as part of your Sunday dinner, it's common enough. So, you know, they're also part of the British food chain, domestic food chain. So there's a lot of important reasons why they would be living in a landscape like this. But part of that are things like hedgerows. So hedges are really important for the British landscape and how it's been characterized, because they form these very natural barriers between fields, and they have a historic precedent. So throughout the medieval period, you can see, tracing back through whichever maps that we have access to, a lot of these boundaries persist, but they are ephemeral in the sense that they are plants making the distinction or barrier between different portions of a landscape versus a more physical and sturdier and long-lasting structure like a wall or like a dry stone wall. So hedgerows are really important for that. The other thing they do is they help keep animals separated. So if you have animals in a pen, those hedgerows work really well to keep the animals on the inside of a pen. Because of the way that hedgerows grow, and I can attest to this having managed a raspberry bush at our last place in Leicester for 5 years, the berries for like blackberries or raspberries and things like that, they will throw up these runner suckers, which they basically go from the mother plant through the root system up to an adjacent area, and they put up a new cane, which will then grow thorns and leaves and then eventually flowers and fruit. So you might have, you know, a thorny bush that's, I don't know, a quarter of a mile long. So they're really big, they can be very wide. They do produce fruit. So if you've ever had a country wine, these hedgerows are one of the ways that historically people have just collected wild fruit and produced their own alcohol in lieu of grapes. So I suspect, based on the vegetable matter in this fleece, that there are a lot of hedgerows nearby, and once the animal gets into it, the thorns will break off, the old canes will break off into the fleece, and they get sort of wrapped around the tips of the fleece, and they just stay there. I had a moment where I needed to consider whether I was going to go through the tedium of taking this vegetable matter out or not, especially considering that it's thorns. I don't want to accidentally poke myself, because not only will it hurt and I might bleed, but you can actually get tetanus from working with thorns without gloves. So do I want to work with this with gloves? Probably yes. But if there's also a lot of thorns, that's going to be problematic with my drum carder because I don't want that to damage my carding cloth. It's actually kind of old now. It's 12 years old? 13 years old. This year it'll be 13 years old. And because of that, I'm trying to lengthen its life as much as possible so that I can continue carding bats with it for another maybe 5 years or so before I will have to eventually replace it because the rubber is starting to break down. But I don't want these thorns to get stuck in there. The second thing I need to consider is the fleece. So because this is actually quite a long staple here, so this is both ends of the same lock, that tells me that where the vegetable matter is located might only be on the tip of the lock. And so all you need to do is take a look to see where the vegetable matter is congregating. And so for this one, it's about here, which means if I do need to cut the fleece, I'm only removing between 1/4 and 1/3 of the overall lock. And so if it's about 4 or 4.5 inches unstretched, then if I shorten it slightly by about maybe 1 inch or so, then once I'm actually carding it, I'll still have a long enough fiber for the drum carder, but not so long that it's too long to use on the drum carder. So I managed to pull out most of the offending bits from the main part of the fleece. So like this bit here, see if I can get it to focus. So this bit here, because it's literally just at the tip, I can pull this out very easily. And since there weren't that many bits like that, I just pulled out as many as I could from the majority of the fleece before I washed it. So I had a very clean product and it wasn't going to get, like the small amount remaining wasn't going to cause chaos for the rest of the fleece, because that's the other consideration to have in mind. So we talked about things like the question of value, not necessarily monetary value, but value for a project, type of vegetable matter, and overall amount. So in the video that I did where I talked about how to tidy up a fleece, I said to kind of aim for around anywhere between 70 to 90% of the fleece should be tidied up. And the reason why I said that is because during the washing and the further processing steps, more of that vegetable matter is going to come out. So if you have a fleece that will open up quite a lot after you've washed it, then you don't need to spend as much time tidying it up, because the effort of just washing it will do a lot of the work for you. So save yourself some time and energy during that step and just let, you know, the rest of the process do the work for you. But in a case like this, where these thorns could just destroy, like if this got all over all of the fleece and really integrated, it would be a sad day, because saving it would be so time consuming. So for this, I pulled out as many of these pieces as possible before I washed it. And then because the way that these locks are formed, right, so that's quite a long that's quite a long lock. So, you know, even if I have to cut off a little bit of some of these, I'm still gonna have quite a bit left over, so I'm fine with that. Now, if you're working with the fleece and cutting might be too much, taking off, then you could look for areas where there's slightly less vegetable matter and then try to save maybe a bit more than you might have otherwise. But if cutting it would reduce the overall length, it might make sense to sort of downgrade it to stuffing. So you could just cut off the bits that offend you, use the really short bits for stuffing into pillows or stuffed animals, or even just using it for the birds. That's also great. Or, you know, the final way I have used fleeces is part of composting or covering plants for overwintering. So it never really gets super cold here in the UK, but it's just sometimes nice to use the fleece so that it, like at the end of the year, so that it has a few months to kind of start to decompose in place, and initially give those plants I'm covering with like a boost to nutrients leading up to the spring. So yeah, those are basically some of the tips I've managed to come up with by asking myself, can it be saved, or is it worth saving? Because it's going to be a very personal set of questions you should ask yourself, and not necessarily one right way to go about it. Now, when it comes to being a beginner and you don't really know what you might tolerate in terms of what it's like to pull a lot of vegetable matter out, because you might buy a fleece that's really expensive someday and part of it has been contaminated, or something like expensive to you, and now there's a little bit that now how am I going to go about this? Is it going to be worth it? You know, kind of understanding what to expect before you endeavor to do something has always been really helpful for me. So this wasn't a super expensive fleece, all things considered, but in terms of what I usually spend on a fleece in the UK, it was comparatively expensive. And so for me, I think it's worth it because it was a little bit more expensive. The area that I need to tidy up is only this much, so it's not going to be like a huge time-consuming activity for me. And because the most offensive vegetable matter is at the very tip, I'm actually still going to get quite a lot of fleece out of this despite having to do some cutting. Okay. So, as I said before, some of these bits might just come right out like that, but there might be areas where there's a whole group of them, or there's some matting, because like this bit here, I can just feel that there's matting in there, which means no matter if I take the vegetable matter out, it's still going to be very stuck. So I'm just going to find a spot where I'm going to cut. And like that, just cut that bit away. So that might be a bit more than I want to cut, but because I've got a decent length of the lock, that's what I have left over after cutting that big piece off. So that's still worth saving. And as you saw, it didn't take that long to find it, and when it comes to actually processing it, it's going to be really easy because I've gotten rid of that matted bit where it was probably rubbing up against that particular bush maybe a lot over the season. And so it's not just the vegetable matter, it's also the underlying matting that would be associated with the animal grazing. So again, that I felt like was a really good decision to cut where it was. And I think the same thing here, you can feel that and that bit there. Now, if this is new to you and you find it a little bit upsetting, that's totally normal. You will have these moments in your like hand spinning or hand processing experiences where you're doing something new for the first time. And when you do something new for the first time, it will often feel like taboo, or, oh, am I doing this right? You know, will people criticize me? They might, but actually, who cares? So I'd rather just have something that's easy to work with, cutting out the bits that I don't need, and just being able to retain as much of the fleece that I spent time cleaning up and washing, and having this little extra also means that if I've got a project in mind and I'm short a little bit, I still have this. Or if I'm deciding I'm going to do a big project, but I want to make sure I sample beforehand, this could be part of your sample, because it might not be perfect for your project, but it might be really good to sacrifice this bit so that you can kind of get an idea of what your finished product might be like from having used a bit of fleece that you were ambivalent about saving. So there's that too. So that's what I've cut off so far. And you can compost that still. So you're not really wasting anything. You're just trying to salvage as much as you can. That's reasonable. And whatever's left over can just go back to nature. So yeah, this is a very sticky bit right here. I can feel it. And like I said, if you feel like you need to have some hand protection, by all means. The thorns, I think, are probably from a blackberry bush, just because of the way that they are spaced out on the stem. I could be wrong, but they definitely don't look like the thorns from a raspberry bush, having had one, like I said. You just kind of know. And so yeah, I'm not even, when I do, oh. Even when I do pull them off the fleece, like I've done just with that one, it's not taking that much of the wool with it. So I'm not damaging my fleece by doing it like this as well. So that's another thing that you might want to consider, is if you're damaging your fleece beyond its ability to then function for the purposes of making yarn, then maybe it's time to cut your losses and skip it. But because this is literally just the very tip, which is going to be slightly brittle anyway because it's the most weathered part, then it's not going to make a big deal, because it might have been left on the drum carder when I was processing it anyway, so not a big deal. So I'm just going to carry on doing this, and then by the end I will have a nice soft fluffy pile of wool that has no vegetable matter in it, no matting, and will be completely usable for my future projects. So I've spent the last half hour going through and trimming out the vegetable matter, and any of the bits like this, which are very clearly felted, that's not going to separate, and I'm going to have to just cut it anyway as part of my processing. So I've managed to get every bit of thorn out, and it's very soft. I can squeeze it like this without fear of accidentally stabbing myself in the finger with one of the thorns. Clearly I've missed a couple of bits, but that's okay. That's actually quite normal. There always seems to be that one more bit of vegetable matter you can take out. Now, because I've cut this, the staple length is going to be ever so slightly shorter than the main part of the fleece, so definitely bear that in mind if you're going to be doing this. Because you can decide now, well, now that this is all clean and fluffy and usable, should I integrate it back with the main part of the fleece, or should I use this as something separate? So that's another consideration to have. You can also use this as, like I said, a sample bit, or you can blend it with something else and then just have it be its own project, especially if you've got a bit more left over. I'm just going to cut that off because it's really dirty. But like I said, overall, if you are trying to decide what to do with the fleece that's got a lot of vegetable matter like this one had, don't be afraid to pick up a pair of scissors and just cut a little bit off. It's fine. When I first asked this question, I was told various things, some of which was you need to bin it, it's not going to be worth your time. And so I just wanted to add my experience to this lot and say that it's a complex question that doesn't have a straightforward answer, and these are sort of the ways that I work through whether I'm going to, you know, say something is worth doing. Because I think overall I got quite a lot of fleece out of this. And then this is the bit that I ended up trimming off. So in reality, it's probably around up to 10 grams for everything I've had to cut out, but I wasn't spending time trying to pick every tiny little bit out. So it was the best solution to the conundrum of, like, is it worth it? Should I do it? Yeah, I did lose some of the fleece as part of this, and some of it was probably still quite good. But some of it was really felted, and deciding which bit to cut or which bit to just pull apart, it was easier to just blanket trim everything, even if it meant losing some length of a lock that would still have been good to use. And this was a big piece of thorn. So this was a big piece of thorn that was in this fleece. So I can show you here just how significant the carnage was. Basically, I thought it was worth doing this video because I had the perfect example to show. I've got plenty of usable fleece after all of that, and realistically it only took me about 30 minutes to snip everything off. So yeah. So that sort of concludes the tidying up a fleece tutorial mini-series. It's 2 videos. But I hope you found it really useful and you kind of understand that the question of, you know, is it worth saving, is complex and situational. So if you are new to this and you've asked yourself this, or you've asked others and you're still maybe on the fence about the answers you've been given, totally fine. Hopefully this has helped you to develop more nuance in how you make certain decisions. And if you needed permission to use scissors, it's a-okay. Don't worry about that. And that you learned something at this video. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. Please post in the comment section below if there's any other things that you wanted to contribute or things that I didn't explicitly mention. You know, add that to the comments, or if I need to clarify anything that I've said or have done, please post that there. I've also got a website, expertlydyed.com, where you can go and get a variety of my products, including some of this fleece when I get around to dyeing it and then listing it, obviously. I've also got links to all of my social media down in the description, as well as my Patreon, where you can support me as a creator a little bit each month, where I will have some kind of member perk, whether it's early viewing of a video of mine without ads, or there's like other projects I'm working on that I will sort of update people about, or even just little mini essays where I talk about various wool-related topics. And then once you are a member, you have access to my backlog of, I think, 80 something posts. So there's quite a lot of content there for you to go and take a look at. But otherwise, that will be it for this video, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye!